And so I co-lead the Nashville Power BI user group. Met Sean at the SQL Saturday Austin BI event back in January of 2020. So it's been a little while now, and it was great getting to meet him. And I'm really excited to be here to talk about this. I will say this is a brand new session for me. There's about maybe 10 to 15 minutes of stuff that was in an older session that I sort of condensed down that I'm gonna go over to just kind of level set a few things. But everything else in here is brand new. So if you guys have any feedback for me, things you like, things you didn't like, etc., just give me a shout. I'd love to hear about that because I am going to give the session again. So if you have any feedback for me, definitely let me know. So I have had in my experience three kind of wow moments where I've just like, really fallen in love with tech and been impressed with the changes. And I'll tell you, the first one for me was when I was 13 years old. Somehow my parents, they owned a small business. They came across a version of Office 95, and they. And so I installed Excel and I started playing around with some of the stuff in Excel. And I remember I could put in, for example, like their monthly production figures for each month. And I could put in, for the data for July, and then the next month I might put in the data for August, and then I'd create a column graph, and the data for August would automatically, the column for August would automatically appear. And I was just like, I was so enamored by this. And I loved it. And I was like, "Hey, Mom, come check this out." And my mom was like, "Oh, yes, that's very nice. Yeah, good work. Keep it up." And she'd go back to whatever she was doing. And I fell in love with Excel, and I've been an Excel junkie ever since, and still I love Excel. I don't spend a ton of time in Excel anymore just because I'm working on other things. About 9 years ago, I discovered Power BI. I only got to the Power BI game, starting in about 2016 or so. But just fell in love with what you could do with Power BI. It's really solved a couple of major problems in Excel. Number one, every time you get new data, you had to do a lot of the same machinations to it, and tools like Power Query made that a lot easier for us. The other thing is it really close the gap on what we wanted to do, connecting people to their data, to their information. So connecting decision makers to the data that would inform those decisions. And so that was a really big wow moment for me. And again, I've just sort of fallen in love with Power BI. And more lately, the next wow moment is AI. And I am so bullish on AI. I love working with AI. And so the intersection of AI and BI for me is something that I'm really passionate about, something that I've been learning a lot about, practicing in every chance that I get. And so I'm really excited to be able to share a bit of that with you guys. So I want to think about the tonight's session in sort of three acts, if you will. So what's now, what's next, and what's beyond. The things that are now are the things that you can begin working with right now to streamline the work that you do, be more effective and efficient in the work that you do, and you can use these techniques to add real value in your day to day right now. And I'll also show some that are maybe you can use them right now, but with some caveats. And just as an aside, I gave a session in March in Atlanta on all of these things. And so, and here's the thing, AI is changing so rapidly that those things that I talked about in AI, and people like loved it. They had lots of questions. They couldn't get through everything because they had so many questions. And now, like 5 months later, those techniques are table stakes. You really need to be integrating those kinds of techniques into the work that you do day to day, or else you run the risk of being left behind, right? And so the old saying, or not old, but the saying is that AI is not going to replace you. The person that uses AI better than you is going to replace you. I'm sure you guys have heard the joke. Two friends are walking through the woods. They come across a bear. One guy says to the other one, like, "Oh, hey, I hope I'm faster than the bear," and the other guy just says, "I hope I'm faster than you." Sort of the same thing with AI, right? You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just got to be, more efficient, more effective than the other folks. And I think that some of the things that I'm going to show you today, it might make you a little bit concerned about the future. You probably should be. And what I want to do is I want to give you a roadmap for what the future looks like. So starting with the now, what you can begin to implement right now today to streamline your work and to be more effective and add more value in the work that you're doing right now. And then the next, so these are really some cutting edge things, and these are the things that I'm super excited about, that I think they're not necessarily adding a ton of value right now, but I think that these are the things that are going to be adding value maybe in the next 3 to 6 to 12 months that will be coming online in that time frame. And so you want to be playing with these tools now so that when they are sort of ready for prime time, that you guys are already ahead of that curve. Because so you don't want to be trying to implement these things after they've already gone mainstream. You want to be putting these out in front of people so that you can demonstrate, these are the new ideas that we're working on and the ways that we're trying to add value in the new and faster ways. And then the beyond is going to be things that really are white papers in academic journals, for example, things that academics and leading researchers at Microsoft and other companies are working on. And these are the things that I think are going to be really critical for the work that we all do, maybe in 1 to 3 years. That's my suspicion. It's hard to say. I don't really know exactly when, but I'll get into some more details on this in a little bit. But these, I think, are the things that are really going to change the game for a lot of us. And what you're going to see when we get here is that even the most advanced functions for us are not beyond are not beyond the reach of AI. So the message that I want you to get today is, that AI, it is coming, it is here, and it is continuing to arrive more and more and bigger and bolder every day. And so I would love for you guys to get a sense of how AI is shifting the landscape that we all work in, and how you can begin to stay ahead of that curve so that you are ready for what the world has in store for us. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to start out with that what's new. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, because I feel like, particularly if you guys are rather savvy, a lot of this is going to be things that you may have tried already. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I do just want to cover my bases and level set a few things here. So we are going to go over a little bit of the what is new. We're also going to spend a bit of time on the more cutting edge things. BI and MCP server integrations and some of the more cutting edge things that you can do. And then I want to talk about the beyond, the what's coming next. And so we're going to talk about some tools like auto prep and text to BI, and also agentic analytics. And then we're going to dive into a bit more detail into what agentic analytics looks like. And then I've got some suggestions on how you can take all this information moving forward, and hopefully we'll leave some, or well, we will leave some time for Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into it. So I want to talk a bit about what is possible right now. So, and you guys may be doing a lot of this, and if you are, just stick with me for a little bit, and I'm likely to show you some things that maybe you're not doing. And so we know that AI is great at writing prose, and it's great at coding. Right. In fact, this is really the core thing that LLMs were originally built for. So they're great at writing things like SQL and Power Query to creating DAX measures, helping you refine DAX measures and optimize them. So it's not as great at that because it needs a lot of context that's difficult to feed in, but you can it can offer some value there. And also Tyndall as well. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Super great at writing Python scripts. You can also use you can use LLM tools for like schema inference and exploratory data analysis. So for example, you can upload a CSV file and it can give you some basic statistic results, and you can also ask it for some summary level statistics as well. And some of the times it'll just find those results and spit them out to you. Sometimes it'll create a Python script for you. And so your mileage may vary on using that, but it is something that you can do. So if you just get a CSV file, particularly if someone is not super technical or savvy, they might just want to throw the CSV into a tool and say, give me a quick summary of this. So that can work. Again, your mileage may vary, but it is an option. And another thing that I love using LLMs for are helping me with documentation, helping me with release notes. So if you need to send a release note to your stakeholder, your report consumers, when you release new production code, then a tool like ChatGPT can help you read that. You can potentially use an MCP server and connect it to your Git repo or your ADO repo and have it look at your last commit, or you can just simply give it your latest commit and say, like update this documentation, for example, and it can help with that. Whether or not that saves you a ton of time, is debatable, because now you've got a bit of legwork up front, just queuing up the AI. Then you got to integrate it back in and so forth. So whether or not that saves you a ton of time, I think is debatable, and it also kind of depends on how exactly you integrate that tool into your existing architecture. So what I want to do is I want to just give you a quick demo. Again, this is sort of, to do some level setting, and so we're going to go through a few of these examples. We're not going to go through all of this, but these are a few of the things that I want to talk about. So I'm going to change my screen share here, and I'm going to switch over to ChatGPT. Okay. So I was doing a demo of this morning, and I was asking ChatGPT for, so basically I was just walking through the presentation and walking through the questions that I wanted to ask ChatGPT, and I was going to go through this live with you guys. And I thought to myself, you know what? It was just taking up too much time. And also, there were some interesting wrong examples, so examples of it hallucinating, that I thought would be interesting use cases to explore. So I decided that I just leave it, and we'd actually go through this example, and you don't have to wait on ChatGPT to finish coding out the rest of the script. So what I want to do is I want to go through some of these queries that I've given it, and we can talk about this experience. So the first thing that I said here was write a Power Query script that will create a date dimension table starting from January 1st, 2020, and go through the date of refresh, include about 30 columns that would be useful in a date table. So right off the bat, it's a fairly simple question, fairly simple prompt. You'll notice that I did not specify what those 30 columns should be, so it's just going to take its best guess at what might be useful. You certainly could say these are all the columns that I want, but I haven't done that here. Quick thought, Power Query is, I know, at least 15 years old, because it was in Excel 2010. So, ChatGPT is really familiar with Power Query. So one would expect it to do very well on this task. And historically, it has done really well on this task. This is the first time I've actually ever seen it do this poorly. I don't know if it's because it's ChatGPT 5. It was also a little bit wonky for me today. So I don't know if the servers are overloaded because everybody's trying to test out ChatGPT 5. I don't know, but it was just giving me some odd results. So let's just take a quick look at what it just spit out. Okay, so we're going to start with some commentary. Fine. Start date January 1st, 2020. Cool. Refresh date, from local now. Cool. And and so it's creating a fiscal year that starts in July. That's fine. I didn't tell it what I needed, so okay. Then it's going to create a date count. So it's going to do duration.days, refresh date minus start date plus 1. So that's exactly how I would do it. Date list. So it takes that. So it creates a list starting on the start date and going the day count, number of days, and duration is 1 day. So again, that's exactly how I would do it. And then it converts that list into a table, gives a name for the one column, and then assigns a data type. So so far, really good. This is exactly how I would do it. It creates these helper functions here. I haven't actually gone through this and seen if this was actually useful or not. I question whether or not this was a good idea, but this is actually not where I have a problem. So you see that the next step is it uses this interesting notation here. I say interesting. I I am not the greatest Power Query expert that has ever lived. I do not handwrite MScript for the most part. I mean, I will a little bit, here and there, but I don't just like pop open the advanced editor and just go to town. Uh, and so I thought to myself, well, maybe this is some advanced nomenclature, some advanced syntax that I'm just not familiar with. So I thought, well, that looks neat. Maybe I'm learning something new because I really thought that ChatGPT knows Power Query very well. And while I might expect it to hallucinate on some things, I wouldn't expect it to hallucinate this significantly on a language like M. So I just kind of went with it. And I was like, maybe I don't know. And so you'll see it creates a bunch of columns, and so we get down here. And so one of the things that I already knew I wanted to change, so this is the column name for this column. So these in green here, these are the column names. And these are not what I call customer facing. So if you know me, you know that I am a very big proponent on everything that is going to face a customer, that a customer will see, that those values should be customer facing, meaning you should have proper spaces, proper capitalization, no underscores, for example. I know that for us techie folks, that's fine, but if you put this in front of an executive, we don't want any of those sorts of things. So my thinking is that the data model should be, because you can open this up for self-service analytics, that the data model should be very clean and customer facing. So the first thing I did is I said, all right, cool, but make the names customer facing, proper capitalization, spaces, no underscores, etc. So it did go through, keeping that weird notation, and it did update all of the column names, took out all the underscores, etc. So great. And so now, sorry, I scrolled a little too far. And so now I copied this and popped it into a blank query, and I got an error message that talked about that it expected a comma. And so now I started to get suspicious that maybe I wasn't learning something new, that this was just making this up. And so I said, yeah, explain this notation to me. I'm not super familiar with this. And so it basically just said, yeah, this is not standard Power Query M. And at that point, I'm just thinking to myself, like, all right, well, like, if it's not, then why are you giving it to me, right? Like, I don't need that code if it doesn't work, right? And I'll be honest, I didn't actually read this entire thing, and so I just took the error code. And so I'm sure you guys know this, but just in case you don't, if you ever get an error code, a great way to iterate with an LLM is, or any AI engine, is you just pop the error code back in. It's like, hey, this is what I'm getting, and so then it's like, yeah, that error is happening because that pseudo pipe syntax I gave you doesn't actually work. And so it then kind of started to get the gist. It's like, oh, you want a query you can that you want a query that actually works. Yeah, like, yeah, of course I want a query that actually works. And so it then rearranged the query and gave me a query that would actually work. And so, if it were me, I probably would have made these a bit more customer facing as well. Unnecessary. We can certainly have a debate about it. That's just a personal preference, but you notice that the column names are actually customer facing, so that's good enough. So I kind of went with that. And then and I did ask it to add one more thing for me, and I said, please add commentary to each step. And just so it wouldn't, go outside the syntax, I said, please make sure this is appropriate for the M syntax, right? So this is just some basic ways you can iterate with your LLM tool choice, just to kind of to get the code that you want, to streamline a few things. How long would this have taken me to do this by hand? Definitely longer than it took me to to do this with AI, right? I definitely did it faster in AI, even with all these problems, than it would have taken me to do it in Power Query, just because there are so many of these columns. However, I also could have, probably could have Googled a solution that would have been, decent, right? And that would have taken maybe about as long or a little less time. But so then it did give me, so it gave me commentary, right, for each of the descriptions for each of this Power Query steps. And so I'm a big fan of lots of commentation in the code and lots of descriptions in the data model. And so the next thing I said was, great, thank you. Can you please write a Tendril script that creates this date table, marks it as a date table, and adds descriptions to the table and to every column. And so this is where we started to get into some real problems. And so, so just so you know, Tyndall is pretty new. They came out with it in January, and so the LLM, the models haven't really been trained on it very sufficiently. It did do some thinking, and so we can come up here. We can say we can see that it thought for about a minute and a half. We can see all the things that it researched and looked at, and it still was not adequate. And the reason that I say that is that I told it I want descriptions, and so this is how it came about adding descriptions. If you know, this is not how you do descriptions. You actually do descriptions with this triple slash comment notation. So you add a triple slash to the Tyndall, and not only does it comment the Tyndall itself, but it also adds descriptions to whatever object is coming next. So in this case, the table is what come next. So this is how you would add a description for the table. This is you would use a triple slash here, and that would then add a description for the column and so forth. So this is not going to work. In fact, it would error out if you tried to do that. So we come down a little bit, and so see it did use that latest M script here. And so I said, please. So I went and found the Microsoft Learn page, and I said, please review this page with Tyndall examples from the Microsoft Learn documentation and give it another try. And so it looked at that page, and it thought for a little bit longer, and it tried again, and again, it was doing descriptions in entirely the wrong way. So we scroll down a little bit further, and so I said, "Thank you. The descriptions are noted as triple slashes in Tyndall code, and so now it is finally getting these descriptions, what looks to be correct on the surface." And I say on the surface because what I did was I took this code and I copy and pasted this into a Tyndall window, and it threw an error that we actually had a double slash notation. So notice that the notation when adding that the Power Query notation is a double slash, but in Tyndall it's a triple slash. And so here, as we start to get into the mQuery portion, it has used a double slash notation, but that is still not correct. This still needs to be a triple slash, and so it was throwing an error here. And so I told it that. So I told it, this doesn't work. And I also said it doesn't mark it as a date table. And so it basically says, oh, good catch. I'll switch that one to a triple slash, but nowhere in here does it. It actually says like I basically don't know how to mark it as a date table. So you can see that there are definitely some ways where AI, where LLMs can speed things up quite a lot. But there are also some places where it just falls dramatically short, and you either have to hold its hand or it just simply isn't able to do a very good job. So this is what I added, what eventually I put into my Tyndall script, and I was able to create this table from scratch using this Tyndall script. Now, it did not mark it as a date table. There were some other things that I would have liked it to do if I had more time, like sort by. So, for example, you sort the month by the month numbers. So you sort the month name by the month number, sort the quarter name by the quarter number, that sort of thing. There's a lot of those that are sort of very standard in date tables that are going to be very repeatable. And so I would love for the Tyndall script to just give me all of that in one shot. And I could have asked it for it, but again, that's sort of more work and more iterations on that. One thing that I have found that's a little bit more successful is if you take a script that is working out of Power BI Desktop via the Tyndall script. You pop that in and you say, this is how you add descriptions. So for example, I had a model where none of the tables, none of the columns, none of the measures had descriptions. And so, and I scripted the whole thing to Tyndall and I threw it into an LLM and I said, add descriptions. And by the way, this is how you do it. And I was very explicit about it. And then I was able to take that and paste it back in. And that was a way to add descriptions for everything in the model across the board super, super quickly, rather than me having to go and do it by hand. And so so it was sort of a bit of a cheat code to get descriptions in a very short amount of time. It only took a few minutes to do that, but it did require that little bit of hand holding. So just a few of the things that you can use AIs for right now. So let me go back to my presentation. Okay, so so our our LLMs can definitely be very, very handy. Sorry, let me get this out of the way. Go back here. So our LLMs can definitely be very handy at helping us with a lot of things. And I will say, in general, the older the tool, the better it's going to be. ChatGPT, Copilot for GitHub can code SQL like nobody's business, right? It can write complex SQL queries. Generally speaking, it can write really good M scripts. I don't know. I just had a bad day today. Uh, you Dax, it can do a pretty good job on. Tyndall, very new. It's not super great at that, right? But you can definitely leverage the tool to speed up some of your workflow. So as a general rule of thumb, for right now, I encourage you to use the tools to get familiar with it, but just know it's not perfect. It's only going to get better. And I think for right now, you'd really want to treat an LLM as a junior pair programmer. You can sort of outsource some basic, repetitive, relatively simple things with good reliability that you can get a reasonable, actionable result back after you've checked it, after you've verified that it is meeting your requirements. Okay, so again, going over some of the things that are available right now. So I just want to talk about sort of breaking down the report consumption and report creation. And one of the things you have at your disposal right now, the Power BI report Q&A visual. So this is the old school Q&A visual that has been around, I want to say, I don't know, like 8 years or maybe longer. The Q&A visual has been around for forever, right? And that still works. You can ask natural language questions. I've never had a ton of success from it. And in general, there are things that you can do with the data model that will help your that will help the Q&A visual be better informed as to the nature and structure and architecture of the model and what things mean that will help it generate better results. There are also ways that you can fine tune some of the things that people are asking. Um, there's also Copilot, so you can ask for report summaries, you can ask it natural language questions of the data, and you can chat directly with your data. And they are actively working on that. They're not really working on the Q&A visual that I know of. They're actively working on Copilot a lot. And if you go watch that August Power BI update, one of the things that they talked about was that they're now allowing you, when you ask a question in ChatGPT, it can go beyond the slicers and filter settings in the page. Until very recently, if you asked it a question, it could only look at the page as it was sliced at that time. And now it is loosening that restriction, and it can essentially ignore those slicers and reapply its own slicers. So if I have it sliced on year 2023, I can ask it about year 2024, and it'll be totally cool with that. That's a pretty new advancement. But so you are getting more and more improvements in Copilot all the time. But again, your usage might vary there. Um, I'll refer you to the gentleman who works for SQL BI named Kurt Bueller, and he's done a series of videos, maybe about 8 or so videos on Copilot, and so he's got a great summary on Copilot and ways that you can help Copilot as well as some of the shortcomings that Copilot has, and so he's a great source for things there. You also have Fabric Data Agents. I will say this is, again, for pretty limited use. You can only connect to about 5 data sources at the moment. It's only for English now, but it's another interesting, broader use case. And we're going to get to the MCP servers in a moment, but you can use MCP servers. This is really more under the next example for me, but they are available right now, which is why I'm including them here. You can ask natural language questions of your MCP servers, and I have found that they are a little bit more robust at the retry and saying, I didn't quite get this right, let me try again, than Copilot is. And so that's one of the things that I really like about MCP services, that they can iterate and apply apply some more advanced reasoning to things. Under the creation paradigm, so you've got Copilot again, so you can use Copilot for generating DAX measures. It won't generate descriptions for columns and tables, which is why I was talking about that when I was discussing Tyndall. You can so you can have it write DAX queries, but also generate your measure descriptions, and you can also have it write entire report pages. They'll be pretty basic. They're not super advanced, but they get the job done. And if you so one potential strategy is that you focus on the the data model creation and optimization, and you optimize it for LLMs like Copilot, and then you turn it loose to people, and then they can sort of create their own reports using Copilot, and they don't necessarily need to be great Power BI report developers because they can just use Copilot to get to something that's quick and easy that answers their question. So, so that could be a path forward for you. You can also use third-party tools. So that was sort of what we were talking about, using ChatGPT to write your M scripts, or write Tyndall, write DAX, etc. And again, you can also use MCP servers to write these things, but you can also actually push content back to Power BI, and so you can use basically anything that the API will allow you to do, or the XML endpoint will allow you to do. You can use an MCP server to do that, and so because you can use the XML endpoint to create a DAX measure in a data set, you can use an MCP server to do that. And so imagine having a natural language experience with your MCP server and your LLM that then allows you to create DAX measures in your data model. I mean, that could be a really interesting use case if the LLMs can be smart enough about it that it gets it right, in a very consistent fashion, right? It needs to be right 95% of the time for it to be worth that effort. And so we're not really there yet, but hopefully we'll get there in the near future. So these are just some of the things that you can do, kind of right now, using AI in your Power BI framework. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is sort of what is coming up in the AI landscape. And so I want to talk about the integration of model context protocols. So model context protocol is something that is really brand new, relatively. I mean, this came out, the model context protocol as a thing was released by Anthropic in November of 2024. So it's not even a year old. But I think that this is really the future for integrating LLMs into Power BI. So what are model context protocols? Like, what does this do for you? And so the short answer is that, like, if you've got an LLM and you've got Power BI, you can even self-host an LLM on a VM inside your company's virtual network. And that might be on a VM in Azure. It might even be in the same data center as Power BI is running in. But obviously the LLM cannot reach into Power BI and run queries, right? You can't just knock on the door of Power BI and say, "Hey, give me Sean's data," right? Because that would be a huge security problem, right? And so there are ways that you can do that with using authentication tokens and using APIs, but the LLM doesn't necessarily know how to do that. So you need to create this bridge that effectively teaches the LLM how to do that and empowers the LLM to use those capabilities. So that's really what the MCP is there to do. It is giving the model the protocols of how to connect to third-party systems. So we've got a little diagram here. Now, again, I've got to give credit for this diagram to Kurt Bueller. And so if you're not following him, you really should be following him. He's got a ton of stuff on AI and BI and in MCP servers. So what you've got here is you've got your local computer, right? And then on your local computer, you're going to have some sort of MCP host. So this could be Quad Desktop, this could be Visual Studio Code, for example. And so I'm going to demonstrate this using Quad Desktop in a moment. And it's going to be chatting back and forth with an LLM service. And so for me, that's going to be Claude, hosted in the Claude cloud. You could be chatting with a self-hosted LLM as well. And that MCP host application, so let's say Claude Desktop, is going to be connected to any number of MCP clients. Those clients will then connect to an MCP server. You can run those MCP servers locally, or you can run them externally. And so an MCP server might connect to, say, like a local file system and be able to pull files from your local directory. You could enable it to look at local applications. This would be neat, maybe if you've got an old school legacy app that can't that can't interface via API, for example. This could be an interesting way to connect that to an LLM, possibly. And you can also use a local MCP server to connect to a third-party service like Power BI. This is actually what we're going to do in our example. I've got a local MCP server that is running, and I will show you a little bit about that. Um, and it is going to connect to the Power BI service. There are certainly third-party cloud-hosted MCP services that you can run. I'm not familiar of any Power BI related cloud MCP server. My guess is there probably will be one that is coming eventually. But this is the basic framework of how Model Context Protocol works. Um, okay, so there are a few sort of natural use cases for MCP in BI. And so one is going to be natural language analytics. So just actually asking natural language queries of your data sets. Asset creation. And so I'm not going to demo this today because I don't think it would work very well for me. But this is, I think, is the thing that is going to be coming. I think that there are going to be coming tools that will help accelerate this. And so because you can push code to a Power BI data set via Tendel, via the API and the XML endpoint, it's all just code, right? And so if the LLM can write the code correctly and then deploy that code via these tools, then there's no reason that the LLM cannot be empowered to push code to your Power BI environment. And so imagine a world where you can tell Power BI create a data set, or tell your LLM create a data set that does X, Y, Z, and it generates the Tendel script or generates the DAX or what have you that would do what you want it to do, and then it uses that MCP to push that content out for you. And the other thing that it can do is it can do some intelligent maintenance. It can it can detect failed refreshes. It can look for broken measures, and it can also propose ways to go and fix that. And again, coming back to the automated asset creation, because it's all code, if you enable it properly, then it could even not only propose those fixes, but go out and fix some of those things for you. That's a really advanced use case, and does depend on the LLM being really reliable in the code that it creates. But I think that that's sort of the vision for the future, not the right now, but the vision for the future that I think is very near. Now, what I want to do is I want to give you a demo on MCP servers in Power BI. Now, just a quick caveat, I have prayed up to the demo gods today, and hopefully this will all work very well. If it does not, I did put a video of this. It's about 8 minutes long. I put it on LinkedIn yesterday, so you can find it there. and just some interesting things up there. So we're going to do a lot of the same things, and I am going to show you guys that right now. So give me 1 second. And before we do that, I just want to bring this over, and I just want to show you guys what the MCP server actually looks like. So I'm going to here, Visual Studio Code, and okay, so here we go. Hopefully you guys should be seeing my VS Code. And so what I've got here, so this actually happens to be written in TypeScript. And so what we see here is, so there's a lot of boilerplate stuff here, but really I want to come down, I want to come down to this section right here. So I was talking about how MCP servers are a series of capabilities that you want to give your LLM tool, the ability to connect to your Power BI service, the ability to do certain things in your Power BI service. And so this is the enumeration of those various capabilities. And I have put a lot of capabilities in here. Uh, and so just to go through a few of these as examples. So this one is called groups get groups. And so it is just going to list all of the workspaces that a signed in user can access. And that's a critical point here, is that the first thing it has to do is sign in. And so I'm going to sign in as me. It's going to leverage something called on behalf of. And so it is only going to have the authentication to do what I have the permission to do. So it's going to do it on my behalf. So it would do it as if I were the one doing it. And so it's only going to see the workspaces that I have access to. And you may, if you've ever studied the Power BI API at all, so there's a sort of basic part to the URL, which is just the api.powerbi.com. And then they all also have this v1.0/my.org. So we really could have just put that up here as well. But so then the API to get the list of groups is you really just say /groups, and then it'll just return all of the groups that you have access to. If you wanted to say get the list of users in a specific group, you could call this function called groups get group users. And the description here, right, is just list principals, or in other words, list all the users that are in a workspace. And you'll notice that the URL for this one is /my.org/groups, and then the GUID, the group ID for that specific group, and then /users, right? And then so it does take a parameter. That parameter is the group ID. So in other words, we've said, I wanted to list all the users in one specific group. So you need to pass in the group ID for that group. And then it will list out all of the users in that group. Let's say I want to add a user to a group. Well, so the URL is this. So it's the same URL actually, but now instead of a get API call, it is a post API call, because I'm sending information to the Power BI service. And so now I need that group ID as a parameter, but now we actually have a request body, a JSON request body. And I don't have to enumerate what that request body would be here. The LLM will craft that request body when it sends this in. I will say this is one of the problems that you have, is that it may not always generate that request body quite correctly. But what you would do is you would pass in the user principal name of the person that you want to add in a JSON body. Right. Let's see. Here's ones you can delete a user in a group. Very similar idea. This one is a get API. I said a delete API command. And so again, it's very similar URL. So this time, so /group/ the group ID /users, and then you simply pass in the user. I believe it's the user principal name. And so the parameters that you would pass in, of course, would be the group ID and the user principal name. No JSON body is required for this one because everything is just in the URLs. And this just kind of keeps going and going for all of these capabilities. This is not all of the capabilities that you can access via the Power BI API. And there are also capabilities that you can access via the XML endpoint, which I didn't even add to this. So you can see that it can do a lot of things just with what's here. And then there's a bit more boilerplate here that goes on. So this is sort of the way that the MCP server is constructed. I get it if you've never tinkered with the Power BI API, this can be a little overwhelming, but I hope that you see that there is a real pattern to the way that this is working. And all you've really done is you've enabled different capabilities for the LLM. So this is one capability for the LLM, this is another one, and so forth. And so the LLM will choose the capability that it wants to use. Okay, so now let's go see this in action. So I'm going to come over to Claude Desktop, and okay, so I've got a blank chat window open here, and so what I want to do is let me I'm going to grab a bit of text here, or actually, sorry, I'm going to pre-type this. So I'm going to say list all data sets in the samples Power BI workspace, along with the refresh times. And you'll notice a bit of a typo. I'm actually going to leave that in there. It's not going to be a problem. Now, I have sort of pre-primed this a little bit. So first of all, I've integrated the MCP client into this, and so that is something that you will want to do ahead of time. Uh, but I am by saying, the Power BI workspace, that is sort of a hint. I want you to use the Power BI MCP server that I've hooked up for you, and I could even explicitly say, use the Power BI MCP server. I could even say use the get groups capability. I can be as explicit as I want, but it's also not super helpful if I've got to tell it every little thing of what to do. So this will actually, the typo is not going to be a problem for it, and it will use that get groups function, that get groups capability, and it will go and find the groups, and then it'll do some other things, and we'll see that in a moment. Quick note before we get started. So it is using Sonnet 4. I could also use Opus 4.1. And the difference here is that this is sort of like the GPT 4.0 model, if you will, sort of the best for most things model. The Opus 4.1, which is brand new, they just came out with it in the last week or so. This is its quote unquote its thinking model. So it is a very it is a more advanced model. It is also more computationally expensive, and Quad has a bad habit of rate limiting me. So just so that we don't get rate limited tonight, I'm going to stick with the Sonnet 4 example. And I've actually found that Sonnet 4 does a pretty decent job, but you might want to consider using Opus 4 for more technical things. So I'm just going to hit enter here, and we'll just sort of walk through what this is doing. So it's just giving it a quick thank you and it's saying, okay, cool. So I'm going to list all the data sets in the samples Power BI workspace along with the refresh times. Let me start by checking the Power BI capabilities. So sometimes this is the first step it will do. Sometimes it will skip over this step, but you'll see that there is something called Power BI capabilities list. So it's literally just going to review all those capabilities that I was just showing you, and it's going to say which of the capabilities should I use. I can say allow once, or I can say allow always. I'm just going to say allow once. And so it's going to say, so the first thing it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, I see that there's something to check the authentication. So let me see whether or not you're authenticated. I may or may not be authenticated. I think my authentication token, okay, my authentication token from this morning has died. And so it wants me to authenticate. So I'm going to say allow once again, and it will generate a URL for me to click. So it's writing out this URL. Okay, now it's speeding up a little bit. Good. And so now it's giving me this lovely little URL to click here. So I'm going to click on this guy and I'm going to say open link. Now let me switch over to my browser and let's go to Chrome. Here we go. Okay, so this is what it looks like for me. And so I'm just simply going to give one click here. And then it says login complete. You can now close this window and return to Claude. It's literally that easy. I'm going to stop sharing that. And I will go back to Claude Desktop. Now, one thing I wish it would do is I wish it would then just figure out that it is signed in, but I have to sort of give it a little nudge. So I'm just going to say, go ahead, and it will run the authentication again to just to test the authentication. So I'm going to say allow once, and it will just test the authentication. And so now it's saying, okay, great. I see that you're authenticated. Let's go find that samples workspace. And so, so it's using this get groups function here, and I can see the request body. So if there is a JSON request body, I can see that here. There is not one. We'll look at that a bit more in just a second. And so I'm going to say allow once, and I can also expand it here and get an example of it as well. We can also see the response, and so you can see that it has found the group ID for the samples workspace. So now it is going to run this datasets get datasets in group. So basically it wants a list of all the datasets that are in this group. And so I'm going to say allow once. And before that it said, oh, perfect, I found the workspace. Here's the GUID. And then this is just, and so now it has found a list of several data sets, and it is going to now get the refresh for that data set. There are 8 data sets in this workspace, so it is going to run through this 8 different times. So here's all the detail for those 8 different data sets. And so now it is going to go through this process 8 different times. So I'm actually just going to say allow always, and it will run through this several times here. And you can see that the request, this is I should clarify, this is not the request, this is not the JSON body that's in the API. This is actually in the URL. These are the parameters that go into the URL. If there is a JSON body, we'll see an example of that in a moment. And so then this is the detail that is coming back on the refresh. So it's just giving you like the last time that it was last refreshed. So it's got to run this a total of 8 times, and it should be wrapping up momentarily. Looks like it's almost done. I think it should be on the last one. Okay, great. So now it says, let me check the refresh. Okay, so it looks like it's doing some more. Okay, so now it's got all of them. So let me create a comprehensive summary. Cool. So here are all the data sets and the last refreshes. And it's going to create a little table for us here. And so it's printing out all of that detail. So here are the names of the data sets, the data set IDs, when they were created, whether or not the refresh is enabled, the last time they were refreshed, they were all refreshed today, and so on and so forth. You can also see that this one's failed pretty recently. So you can see, some interesting information. I could have just gone to the workspace and gotten this information way easier than I got this. But imagine hooking this up to, say, like a nightly a thing that tests for failed refreshes, and then it later automatically goes out and refreshes any data sets that were refreshed, right? So imagine a more agentic pipeline that says, go test every production workspace and every data set in every production workspace for failed refreshes, and if they are failed, give it one retry. Because sometimes a data set refresh will fail for networking problems, just some random hiccup, and all you got to do is just try a refresh to just do the refresh again, and it'll go through. Not always the case, but I found it to be a pretty common problem. And so, you can imagine having this just go through and reprocess those for you. So wouldn't that be kind of handy, a handy thing to have? So let me now try something a little bit different. And so I've got a different workspace called Shelf Mart, and I'm going to say, what is the total foot traffic for 2024 in the Shelf Mart workspace? So I don't know whether or not it's obvious, but I am sort of hinting to Claude that, that I want it to look in a specific workspace here. And so saying, okay, so let me first look for the data sets in the group. I didn't actually see that it got the correct GUIDs, the group GUIDs, so that's a little curious. Um, but we see here that it went and found the data sets that is in that workspace. There's only one data set in that workspace. So it says, perfect, I found the shelf mark data set. Now let me execute a query to get the total foot traffic. And we can expand this and have a look at that query. So it says summarize, filter the foot traffic table where the year of the date column equals 2024. Cool. It's going to create a new column called total foot traffic, and it's going to sum the foot traffic table and the foot traffic column. So that's a pretty reasonable query. And then these are the particulars that it needs: the group ID, the data set ID. I'm a little curious where it got the group data set ID. It might be because I was testing this morning, so it might be in its memory, maybe. And so you can see the result set that it got back. And so we got back one table with one row and one column, the column called total foot traffic 2024. And so this is the returned value. And it puts it in a nice little summary for us, and it says that the foot traffic for 2024 was over 263 million visitors. And indeed, if I go to my browser and we can take a look at this report. I happen to have it up here. And you can see this new card visual is filtered to calendar year 2024. And you can see, indeed, the foot traffic is 263 million visitors for 2024. So that example works more smoothly than it has sometimes. But you can see, the potential that if you can sort of work out some of the kinks that might come, that this can be a really interesting tool for self-service analytics. The working out the kinks is really, I think, going to be the problem. But imagine if you could imagine if this worked as well as LLMs work in general, just for sort of everyday language crafting things. And if you could turn this over to an executive and imagine a world where an executive could write natural language questions to a tool more easily than he could write an email to one of us saying, give me this answer, please. I think that is, the culmination of self-service that we've been working towards, that could be really, really powerful. And so, if you're the person that can bring that to the CEO, imagine how grateful that CEO is going to be that you can put, his company's information right at his or her fingertips, right? I want to give one more example before we move on. And so I'm going to say add user David.Darwin at McKinley.Consulting to the samples workspace with viewer access. Now I am setting Claude up to fail, and there's a reason why, and so I'm doing this intentionally. And so it says, cool, I'll add David.Darwin at McKinley.Consulting to the samples workspace with viewer access. And we take a look at this. So this is what it tried to do. And this is the error that it got back. So it says code unauthorized message operation requires the following scopes workspace.readwrite.all. And so now it's saying, let me test the capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. I'm actually going to, okay, so it has recognized that this did not work, and it actually gave me some good options here. So option number one, you can basically go, it's telling me go do it yourself. I mean, okay, that does work. And then option number two, this is this is actually really impressive. I'm surprised that it gave this good of an answer. So the trick here, and the reason why I wanted to show this to you, was in order for this to work, you need two things in place. First of all, the MCP server needs to have the capability enabled. And if we go back and look at that code, there is a capability that it tried and tried reasonably to run called groups add user. We actually looked at that one, and it's formulated correctly. It did give a good, honest effort. The other thing that you need is an intra, or what we used to call Azure Active Directory. You have to register that MCP server as an application. So I've done that ahead of time. And then you have to turn on capability by capability the various things that you allow that MCP server to do. And so I disallowed the MCP server from changing the user bases in my in my workspaces. The short answer is I don't want it making that change because that might be too risky for me. The point is you get to decide what risk profile you are tolerant of and what you're willing to put up with and what might be uh, not safe in your mind. And you can sort of do this capability by capability. Just because someone writes it into the MCP server doesn't mean that that functionality is enabled automatically. You've actually got to turn that on in Microsoft Intra, and I intentionally have left that switched off here. Okay, so that is the last example for MCP servers that I wanted to go over. I'm actually going to go back to my screen here, and we'll go back to the presentation. All right. So I think that the MCP servers are a really neat tool. I think that they are something that has, sorry, um, trying to go, here we go. So I think the MCP servers are a really interesting tool that have the potential to really streamline a lot of the work that we do. One of the problems is that right now you can do most of these things faster than yourself, faster than the MCP server can do it. But I think that what we want to do is we want to start playing with these tools right now to stay ahead of that curve so that we can understand where things are going in the future and how we can begin to leverage these tools going forward. So like I say, MCP servers, they're a bridge that connects your LLM to various other tool sets, not necessarily Power BI, could be a lot of things. Yeah. So moving from next to beyond, what I want to talk about now is these are things that are you can't even really play with yet. These are really theoretical exercises, and they are tools that academics and leading researchers are working on right now that I think are going to change the game for us even more radically in the next. My suspicion is 1 to 3 years, I think. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things, one called Auto Prep, another called Auto BI. They're very similar from different research teams. And the short answer is, imagine if I have some massive flat file, might be 100 columns wide, and as a data modeler, as a Power BI practitioner, I'm going to take that data set and I'm going to figure out how should I model it? What should the tables look like? What should the granularities be? How do I relate one table to another? And what Auto Prep and Auto BI are doing is you can just throw that data into the model. It'll look at the model and it'll figure out how the data relates to one another. What is the best structure? So it might say, oh, you need a customer table, you need a product table, you need a date dimension table. Here are the sales fact tables that you need, and it will construct that data model for you. It will then create the ETL that you need. So the Power Query queries or the SQL queries, for example, it will create all of those bits for you that will actually render out so it'll generate the ETL scripts for you to create those tables, and it'll also create the relationships between those tables for you. So I have these academic papers. I'll send these to the leadership team, and they can put it on GitHub along with this presentation. And these researchers are touting a 70% accuracy rate in terms of creating efficacious models. The way that they've done this is they basically pointed it to thousands of existing models in stored in GitHub, and so it's looked over lots and lots of models, and there are there are a lot of repeating patterns, right? And so it's learned from those patterns and it's figured out how to do the job of data modeling and ETL for us. There's another tool called text to pipelines, another one of these research papers, and it's a very simple, similar sort of a thing. It's a natural language to pipeline tool set that can create pipelines in Python, in Azure Data Flows, and in other tools. And it's the same sort of a thing. You can tell it what you want to do, right? You can just natural language tell it, I want an ETL pipeline that is going to do X, Y, and Z, and it will create that for you. These tools, I think, are still a ways away. So these, unfortunately, are not things that we can play with right now. But this is sort of, I think, what's coming down the line. Maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now. But ultimately, right? Those of us who are like ETL developers, we're safe from AI for the moment. But I think that there's going to come a day when AI can do most all of these things. And so as that becomes more and more true, I think that we have a narrowing window of time right now where we can begin to rethink what is going to be our place in this ever-changing landscape where AI is filling in more and more and more of those spaces. Okay, so what I want to talk about next is agentic analytics. And this is a bit spread across the what's next and the what's beyond, and because some of these things are possible now by sort of combining together different tool sets, and some of these things are maybe looking forward a little bit. But so I want to talk about what agentic analytics looks like. And so agentic analytics is going to combine data analysis. It's going to combine AI reasoning. So it's going to look over a set of data and it will make decisions on what actions that it needs to take. And then it will take those various actions and it will do that by being tied in to lots of different systems. And so it might be tied into those systems by using those MCP servers, for example, or using various API calls, et cetera. It'll reason over the data set that it has. It will make a decision on the action that needs to be taken, and then it will go and actually execute that decision. And then things will change based on that action, and it will learn and refine the action that it needs to take. Let me give you just a very, very basic, just sort of stupid, simple example. Imagine if you had something that looked at the thermostat of a walk-in cooler, and it might say, "Oh, I see that the temperature is getting hot. I'm going to kick on the cooler, the chiller in the walk-in cooler, right?" And so it brings the temperature down, and then it says, "All right, cool. The temperature's cool enough. I'm gonna switch that off, right?" And so it's at that point we basically re-engineered a glorified thermostat, right? Well, so imagine a world where it just brings the temperature way down too far and it freezes all the produce, and now the produce is ruined. So the model might learn from that, for example, and learn to not bring the temperature down too far. So that sort of thing. So one of the requirements of an agentic system is that it has the ability to learn from its outcomes. There are four main traits to an agentic system. So first of all, you've got autonomy. The agent needs to be able to operate independently and of its own agency, if you will. I think this is the one where we can sort of put in a grading, a scale here. We can put in a spectrum, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we might want to sort of dial this back, particularly in the early stages. It is also goal oriented, so you want to the agent needs to be focused on achieving a goal. So you tell it, I want to keep the temperature of the walk-in cooler between this specific range. I want to make sure that my warehouse never runs out of a particular inventory item, for example. Another thing that an agentic system needs is memory and feedback. So in other words, it needs to be able to say, it needs to be able to look over its past decisions and then refine its decision making algorithm by looking and see how it has performed, and then hone that algorithm in and make better decisions in the future. And the other thing that it needs is tool use. If it makes great decisions but can't do anything with those decisions, it's just not really an agent per se. And so it needs to be connected to other tools that you can do some things with. So just a quick example of what an agentic age what agentic analytics is and what it is not, right? So it is not, I found a problem in your data. What do you want to do about it? Right. So that's not really agentic analytics. Agentic analytics is saying, I noticed that there was a problem in the Southeast region. I evaluated 3 options and I've already implemented the optimal solution. Here's what I did and why I did it. Right. By the way, you might want to put in some stop gates in that flow, and we'll talk about that a bit more in just a moment. But this is sort of what agentic analytics is. It is finding the problem, reasoning over the problem, identifying an appropriate way forward, then potentially taking action on that path forward, and then just simply updating you and saying, hey, there was a problem, I've already fixed it, right? Kind of like the best assistant you've ever had, right? Saying, hey, I noticed that there was a problem, but it's already resolved, here's what I did, right? Would you rather have the guy who comes to you with a problem and asks you what you do about it, or would you rather have the person who said, yeah, hey, I already fixed it, you're good to go. um so I want to just sort of give you a few examples to try to make this a little bit more real for you. So imagine that you had a sales forecasting agent that pinpoints that conversion rates are low in a specific region, and maybe it identifies certain underlying issues for why those conversion rates are low. Maybe certain salespeople are not making enough cold calls, or they're not visiting on clients enough, right? So it can look at the data and decide what the problem is, and then actually provide specific tailoring, and then send that coaching to leadership in that area, and say to them, you need to provide coaching on people making more cold calls, making more in-office calls, et cetera, whatever the situation may be. Or imagine, for example, an inventory optimization tool that is proactively adjusting your purchase orders based on inventory levels. It might monitor weather patterns. For example, this is many years ago, but I had a problem where I had ordered a very critical part, and it was coming on UPS, and there was a blizzard, and I had to call UPS. Where's my items? Like, oh, it got delayed because of the blizzard. Well, what are you going to do, right? Well, if we had thought about it, we could have ordered that part a bit in advance, or shipped for paid for it to be shipped in higher priority, for example. And so imagine an agent that is constantly monitoring all of these pieces, and can take appropriate actions to make sure that you don't run out of a part or an inventory item. Employee churn prevention, for example, there's a lot of data and research on indicators of when an employee might be ready to leave the organization, which can be very costly for companies. So wouldn't it be great if AI could monitor for those signs, and then send somebody, whether in HR or their boss, some suggestions on what to do about that problem? This is in particular, I think, is one I might be just a little bit cautious about, because you want to be very careful when you're taking actions in an automated fashion when it comes to your employees. The last thing you want to do, is say, like, for example, terminate a bunch of employees because AI told you so, right? So how just sort of freely you let agents work within your organization, I think, is going to be one of the things that you have to, as a company, become comfortable with. So some of the enablers for agentic analytics. So you're going to need real-time data infrastructure. If you have data that's coming in on a monthly basis, agentic analytics is not going to be appropriate for you. You can't bring in data on a monthly basis and expect it to be able to work on the fly. It needs to be able to work on real-time or near real-time data for it to be meaningful. Certain events and triggers. So this goes back to the goal. What are the things that it is going to drive towards? And so, for example, a trigger might be, that our inventory levels are becoming too low, and we're looking at this weather pattern that might become a problem. And so that could be a trigger that triggers the agent to decide on an action and then take that action. The planning layer is sort of the AI, the brains of the agent that then reasons over all that data and figures out what to do. And the action interfaces are the connection to those tools. So in that supply chain example, it might be connections into your ordering system or your vendor's ordering system, and the ability to place those orders automatically, or possibly to queue up the order and then send someone in purchasing a link to that queued up order and saying, here's what I've got for you. This is the reason why I did it. All you got to do is just go hit buy. Everything's queued up for you, right? And so that's a way that you can sort of keep a person in the middle, and your agent's not going off spending millions of dollars on inventory that you don't need. And you're also going to want notification systems, right? That you can notify people, say, this is what I did, or this is what I've queued up for you and what you need to go do. And boy, are you going to need a lot of governance, because imagine all the things that could go wrong with agents. Like I was mentioning earlier, if you're making hiring and firing decisions or taking actions on it, right? I mean, first of all, that's just probably a terrible idea, right? Now and forever, I don't know that I ever want agents sitting making those sorts of decisions in an organization. But you can imagine the even more benign things. You definitely want a lot of governance over anything that an agent is going to do. You want lots and lots of comprehensive logging in any sort of agentic solution, so that you can track exactly what it did. That you can roll back what it did. So whether that just be sort of canceling that order, rolling back code changes that it pushed, what have you. And you likely are going to want lots of human in the middle opportunities, so that a person can actually make a decision on whether or not the action that the AI is taking is appropriate. Some risks and mitigations. So we've already seen some hallucinations today, and that is going to continue being a problem for this foreseeable future. And so you definitely want to think about how you can both mitigate hallucinations, and also what to do about that in the future. One concern is, if you're taking people out of the process, do they have sufficient information to make constructive decisions, and are they integrated into the process enough to make appropriate decisions? If you take human beings out of the process altogether, then you're just sort of left at the whim of AI, and that might not be where you want to be. So I think making meaningful decisions about how you want to integrate AI into your workflow is a really important step. Another risk is lack of explainability and trust. You want to. So you saw how we could look at the thinking, for a minute and 25 seconds earlier. We could walk through its thought process. We didn't take the time to do that, but it did list that for us. And so you want that as an option, so that you can go back and see why it did the things that it did. You certainly want to give a lot of thought to security and compliance, and the potential for data loss. If an agent has a lot of free range in your organization, it could accidentally go send your data to a place where it's not supposed to be. Imagine if you work in healthcare and you give an agent access to the data, and then it accidentally emails that data out, and now you've got a HIPAA violation, for example. Some effective mitigation techniques. So you want a lot of very robust policies, and you want human in the loop checkpoints for any sort of critical decisions. You want a lot of decision gates in your process. Lots and lots of logging to capture exactly what is going on. So how can you begin to implement some of these things in your workplace today? So the first thing I would say is you want to start thinking about some metrics and some triggers. So how can you implement KPIs and some alerts and some contextual summaries? So these are really just sort of taking data and maybe and summarizing that, for example, maybe based on a trigger, based on some KPI. And so this is something that you can do right now. And so you would key the tool into your data sources and say, we're watching for this, and whenever it happens, just send me an email, tell me what happened, and give me an assessment of the situation. Then once you kind of become a bit more comfortable with that, the next step would be have AI recommend a solution to you, right? Where it makes some recommendations on some things that might be done to mitigate the problem that it is detecting. And then once you become more comfortable with that, then the next horizon would be autonomous agents where you begin very slowly to give agents more and more autonomy to take actions. And again, you want sort of very explicit goals, very narrow scope, changes that can be easily reversed, procedures that can be rolled back. And so you want to minimize that risk profile as much as possible and only expand that risk profile as you become more and more comfortable with these autonomous agents and what they're able to do. So, what are some things that you can do right now? So you can begin to implement AI assisted coding in your team right now today. So we've seen how you can do that with M, although it didn't really work great for me today, but it usually actually is pretty good. It's dead solid with saying like SQL query, with SQL queries in Python, for example. Usually dead solid with Power Query. It can help with Tyndall in some ways, but you really gonna have to kind of hold his hand. You can use it for documentation and release notes, and you can also use it. If you are working with any flat files, you can just sort of throw a flat file in and have it speed up your work there. And you can begin testing agents in a sandbox. And so what you want to do is you want to hook those into your data infrastructure right now. And you want to keep some very good logs of exactly what all it is doing. And you want to document everything that you learn from that agent. Lots and lots of documentation.